Hey, what's going on? Welcome to this little bonus video in this series. Now, because this is the first one, I just want to clarify that technically you can get started without watching this video, but I wanted to use these videos to add a little bit of context, answer some commonly asked questions from people who are doing the course. And the first question that has pretty much come up from day one is, how exactly does Glide fit into the overall stack for setting up a marketplaces? And that's the question that I'm going to be answering today. Now, as you all know, when I started working on the Unicorn Factory, my setup was very, very simple. It was simply Airtable, which is the database tool, and then using an automation tool like Zapier to send the information to the Webflow CMS that would then go ahead and create all of the different landing pages. Now, this was the perfect starting point because really all you need in order to create a directory is, you could arguably say the Webflow CMS, but if you want to have some level of control of your data and the flow of data, then also, of course, the Airtable and Zapier stack. Now, this evolved over time where I then started to have the need for additional features, for example, the ability to collect subscriptions from customers, and that is then when Memberstack came into the mix. And this has been the stack that I've been pretty much using on the Unicorn Factory for the last few years. I have migrated away from Zapier and have started using Make as my automation tool instead. But overall, the core stack has pretty much remained Webflow, Memberstack, and Airtable. And this has served me pretty well. I felt like as a stack, that was pretty much the go-to stack to use, simply because Memberstack pretty much allowed you to create the functionality for managing payments and subscriptions on your site. The thing that I also loved about it is that it integrated directly with Webflow, which allowed you to pretty much customize your portals in whatever way you want. But after having, also taught this stack through the MVMP program over the last few years, I've actually found that people who are just getting into building these types of sites can run into situations where learning Memberstack on top of learning Webflow as a complete beginner can feel a little bit overwhelming. And that is because Memberstack is actually quite a complex tool to learn. So if you've had to play around with it, you'll know that you'll need to know how to use different scripts. You use data attributes quite heavily. And let's put it this way, there is quite a learning curve involved, and that learning curve typically creates a delay when it comes to getting your site live. And I kind of feel like when you are going through the process of building a site and you can't reach certain milestones fast enough, it can be quite discouraging. And so I've been rethinking what kind of stack could be an alternative that would make the overall user experience quite easy, and that is where Glide comes into. Now, I want to start off by saying that the stack that I now talk about, which is the Webflow, Airtable, and Glide stack, was not really possible a few years ago. Now, even though Glide was around, it wasn't really ideal. I mean, there were like a few bugs and there were a few issues with some of the Airtable integrations, but Glide has come a long way over the last few years. And to explain very briefly how Glide fits into the mix, one of the key challenges that you're going to need to solve when you're building a two-sided marketplace is, first of all, creating the front end, the directory pages. And so that's what we do in Webflow. And the reason why we do this in Webflow is because of the SEO benefits that you get from having public listing pages, profile pages, those types of things. But then we also need to create the functionality that will allow our customers to interact with our site. And one of the most common use cases that you're going to run into is, first of all, when a service provider wants to update their profile, when a customer wants to reach out to a service provider. And so typically what that required in the past is a set of automation and workflows that would basically send data to Airtable, and then you would have to set up new workflows that would then send additional information to other platforms. And really, as you're just getting into the process of learning how to build these sites, it can lead to extra complexity. Using the connection between Glide and Airtable takes that complexity out of the mix, because what Glide does is it actually just takes your Airtable data and converts it into an interface. And one of the key things that I really love about Glide is that it actually allows your customers to override information inside of your Airtable base through their Glide portal. And so what you can do is create the functionality that would typically require somewhat complex Memberstack setups, countless workflows that take different use cases into consideration, and you can just simply connect them to each other. And so that has now made the process of client account management so much easier. You just connect your Glide base to your Airtable base, and you can then allow your customers to do things like update their profiles, or your clients to message your service providers. And then you can make connections between tools like Airtable and Webflow that allows you to send the data back and forth. Now, you can still set up traditional automation tools like Make to create that functionality, but over the last year, there have actually been more automation tools that have come out that have made this process even easier. One of them is WhaleSync, and what WhaleSync does is it essentially creates the same functionality that you have between Glide and Airtable, which is syncing. So basically, any changes that happen automatically apply to Airtable. So any changes in Glide automatically apply to Airtable. With WhaleSync, you can set up a workflow where any changes that happen in Airtable automatically apply to Webflow. And the cool thing about this is, like I said, you don't need to create 3 or 4 different use cases or workflows. You don't need to create a workflow for creating items, updating items, deleting items. It all just automatically syncs. The tool WhaleSync automatically takes care of it for you. Now, one of the main questions that now kind of comes up is like, if we use Glide instead of Memberstack, how exactly are we going to process payments? Because Glide does not have a native integration with certain tools, but luckily there is a solution, and that is by simply using custom integrations and workflows to connect Glide to your Stripe account, and then the actions that happen inside of Stripe to your Airtable base that you can create using, again, either Make or WhaleSync. Now, how exactly do we control how users interact with our Stripe account? Now, the first way that you can do that is to simply add Stripe payment links. So if you want to sell products or services, you can simply create the products inside of Stripe and then generate payment links that you can then add to client portals. When it comes to subscriptions, it actually works in a very similar way. All you really need to do is to create the functionality that will allow your customers to manage their billing. And luckily, Stripe has some phenomenal documentation on how you can do that, which means that you can create the subscription functionality that will allow you to then basically create similar functionality to Memberstack. Now, a quick little note. Memberstack handles all of the hiding of content for you depending on what membership type you're on. This here will require a little bit more of a manual setup, because what you'll basically have to do is set up a connection between Stripe and Airtable that monitors the status of someone's subscription or payment or whatever it may be, and then update Airtable with that information so that you can then go ahead and set custom rules to say, if a user hasn't paid their subscription, so they're past their due date, update it in Airtable, and then in Glide you can set custom rules to basically hide certain parts of the portal if the status of a payment is past due. And so that is a very specific example, but the key thing here is that all of the functionality that you can create with Memberstack, you can create using Glide. And so the last little thing to say about Glide is that one of the main downsides that I've heard people talk about when it's come to Glide is simply that you don't have as much design freedom, and it can sometimes create the impression that your Webflow front-end side is quite disconnected from your back-end. However, most modern software companies actually kind of have disconnected marketing sites and backends. You can control the fonts, you can control the colors, and that really makes up the 80-20 of designs and interfaces. And so I think that this stack here is significantly simpler. It makes it also a lot easier to create all of the functionality that you're going to need in order to create these, user portals that sync directly with the front end. And so overall, I would say that this stack here has created a lot of opportunities. I've pretty much migrated all of the Unicorn Factory over to that. I still have Memberstack in my stack simply because you can't just migrate away from it when you've already got something set up. But if I were to get started, my initial starting point would be to set up my Airtable base, create my landing pages in Webflow, and then to basically create the first client portal for your service providers that allow them to update the profiles. And so the Glide course really takes you through how this interaction works between Glide and Airtable. And then the other side, the Webflow Airtable stuff is the other content that you'll find in the MVMP program. But overall, this is just a replacement setup, or like a newer setup that has really become possible over this last year. So hopefully this adds a bit of context, explains how Glide fits into the overall stack, whether or not you still have to use Memberstack. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. Bye.